What's going on, everyone, and welcome back to Jam with Jock. In one of my recent uploads that resonated really well with you guys, I spoke briefly about an EQ called the Pultec. Now, this EQ definitely deserves a video of its own. The Pultec is my favorite analog EQ, but at first it was quite intimidating for me and it took a while for me to get used to it. I think this is the case for most modern producers because we're used to one of the more modern EQs that has a lot more visualization to it. Just looking at an analog EQ where you can't see anything and you just need to know numbers specifically can be quite challenging to begin with. So I've put together a little loop today, which I think a lot of the elements need that Pultec EQ on it. So let's go ahead and have a listen to the loop first, and then we'll start applying the EQ. Now, as I said at the start, the Pultec can be quite intimidating. So let's have a look at all the functionalities and then we can start applying it to our loop. So the one thing that the Pultec is famous for is its boosting and attenuating. In other words, attenuating also means cut. So this is an analog EQ. So you boost in frequencies. So for the low frequencies, you can boost from 20 Hertz all the way up to 100 Hertz. And then with the high frequencies, you can boost all the way from 3K to 16K. The boost knob determines how much you want to boost of that frequency. So obviously the higher number, the higher the boost that you're going to get. Now, where the confusing part laid for me and probably many others at the beginning is this attenuation. So if you're boosting at 5 and you're cutting at 5, you would imagine that they would cancel each other out, but that's not the case. So if I throw a more modern EQ on it, we can visually see what I'm talking about a little bit better. So we'll throw a Pultec on it and then also a Pro Q3. So when we're boosting, we're getting a shelf. Okay. So the area that it boosts, it's a lot broader than what we actually anticipate. We're not actually just boosting at 30 Hertz because, well, let's just say we're boosting at 100 Hertz. We're here at 100 Hertz. And as you can see, there's frequencies being affected all the way up to 187, even more up to 286 Hertz. There's frequencies being affected because a low shelf, or just a shelf in general, is a lot more broad and not as precise as a bell. So that's where the attenuation comes in. The attenuation is actually formed by a bell EQ. So if we add a bell EQ here and we attenuate down, what that's doing is it's taking away those frequencies that we didn't want to boost in the first place. So we're really getting the best of both worlds here because we're getting that Pultec warmth by boosting our low end that we wanted, but it's also getting rid of a lot of the muddiness that comes around this frequency range. So very important that when you guys want to boost kicks or bass, that you really attenuate along with that as well, because any frequencies between 200 to 400 Hertz can be really quite muddy and unpleasant. And without that, it's just going to become quite boomy. So the high frequencies work in a very similar way to the low end. We have our boost, we have our attenuation, and we also have the frequency that we can select. The only difference is we have this attenuation selector. And to help visually see what's going on here, I'll just get this EQ curve analyzer and I'll attenuate at 5. And if I want less of an attenuation, I then go up all the way to 20. We also have this bandwidth knob at the bottom. So say if I'm boosting and attenuating at about 4.5, this bandwidth determines how sharp or how broad. So if I want some more precise EQ work, I'll keep it on sharp, but I often like to go up between 3 and 5 just to have it a little bit more subtle and broad. So it's not just impacting one frequency in particular. So enough talking, let's go ahead and start applying this Pultec to the kick first. And so this is where I find myself using it the most on kicks. There's actually some really great kick presets on it because it's something that is commonly used on kicks. So I'm happy to be boosting at 30 Hertz. I don't want to go as low as 20 to be impacting the subs. And I also don't want to be impacting the mids too much by going anywhere between 60 and 100. So for kicks, I like to stick to 30 and we'll start boosting now and listening to where we think sounds good. So I'm happy there with the attenuation being a little bit higher than the boost. And that's just because I was hearing a bit too much muddiness and I wanted to try and clear that up a bit. So that's where the attenuation came in. So if I turn on this EQ analyzer, we can see what it's doing. So we're boosting those frequencies that I wanted, anywhere from 30 Hertz is that shelf. That attenuation then is doing such a great job in cutting all of those frequencies from 200 Hertz all the way up to 1K, which can be quite unpleasant in a kick drum. Let's go ahead and throw that Pultec on my snare as well. If you're not too familiar with where to boost and cut certain frequencies, then I would definitely look to some cheat sheets online. You can find a lot of good resources that tell you what frequencies for snares or kicks or any sound that is a good suggestion to boost or cut. If we take a look at this drum mixing cheat sheet here, we can see what frequencies to boost for certain sounds. So if we want some crisp on the snare, let's boost 5 to 7K. I'm looking for a little bit of crisp and some more oomph. So we're going to go and boost between 200 to 300 Hertz to start off with. Now I'm going to go all the way up to 100 here, and because we're using that low shelf, it's still going to impact that 200 to 300 range that we wanted to get that oomph. All right, so now we're going to get some of that crisp. So let's start boosting at 5K and see how that sounds. Let's have a listen to it off and on. I've just taken that bandwidth down from number 3 broad all the way down to just completely sharp. I just think it helps it have a bit more presence. So kicks and snares are the two places that I use the most, and I hope that you could see from those two examples how much it really impacted the sound. The one thing I really would be careful with though is it does add a lot of volume to your sounds. So make sure you're always checking your volumes in your session view. Just because it sounds louder doesn't mean it actually sounds better. So try and gain stage it by checking the volumes before and after, and just really try and listen to what the sound's actually doing. Because if it's just making it louder, then that's not a great way to mix. It's also commonly used on vocals. I've just thrown it from my acapella folder and it fits in the key of my track. So we'll see what we can do with it with the Pultec.
Well, I'd be doggone if I wouldn't work all day, baby. And I'd be doggone if I wouldn't bring you my pay, baby. Well, I'd be doggone if I wouldn't work all day, baby. And I'd be doggone if I wouldn't bring you my pay, baby. Well, I'd be doggone if I wouldn't work all day, baby.
I'll solo it now. We can play it with and without.
Well, I'd be doggone if I wouldn't work all day, baby. And I'd be doggone if I wouldn't bring you my pay, baby. Well, I'd be doggone if I wouldn't work all day, baby. I'd be doggone if I wouldn't bring you my pay, baby.
So that is the Pultec demystified. I know it can be confusing at the start. Like I said, for me, it took a long time for me to get used to it, but just try and comprehend that the attenuation is just to get rid of some of those unwanted frequencies, because the low end is boosted by a shelf, and shelves create a lot more frequencies than the actual specific range that we're targeting. So that attenuation, which is EQ'd by a bell, is there to solve that issue. You can create some of the most unique sounding EQs with the Pultec, so I highly suggest you get a copy for yourself and try and implement some of these techniques today. I got mine on Black Friday last year, so I would suggest that you guys start looking around this time, start purchasing one as well on Black Friday. The two main places that I would look for them is from Waves or UAD. If you learned something in this video, I'd really appreciate if you could hit that like and subscribe button. And once again, thank you so much for staying to the end of the video. If you wanted to go ahead and keep watching my stuff, I'll just put my latest upload right up there. Till then, I'll see you guys in the next one.